Hi, this is Yemi Stimbridge, and I'm making this video to introduce and frame the residency model. In this video, I want to briefly talk about what residencies are, what you can expect in your residency, and how you can prepare. I spend a lot of time thinking about equity in the larger society, but more specifically in my work with schools, what I've found is that the questions that we ask about equity are questions about whom we teach. But these should also be complemented by questions that we ask about pedagogy, which are the questions relative to how we teach. Our goal in the residency is to think deeply using both our equity and pedagogy lenses, because if we're talking about equity and not talking about pedagogy, there are some risks. The risks of talking about pedagogy without considering equity are that we may inadvertently normalize the patterns of underperformance by some groups relative to others. The residency is an extended time of concentrated discussion focusing on issues that live at the intersections of equity and pedagogy. We're going to be defining equity in terms of pedagogy, and we're going to be developing pedagogy that reflects an equity mindset. I think of the work that lives in the overlap of equity and pedagogy as culturally responsive education. CRE is a concept that's at least 30 years old, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But first, I want to establish a few baseline ideas that really frame the overall purpose of our time spent together. The goal of culturally responsive education is the intentional design of learning experiences so that students have meaningful opportunities to bridge concepts so that they have the fairest opportunities to learn. That means we have to be both knowledgeable about our students' concepts, yes, but we have to give our students opportunities to bridge those conceptual understandings themselves. Over the last 10 years or so, working in schools and with teachers, I've identified 6 themes that give context and language for how to think about and discuss culturally responsive education. We'll spend some time together discussing these themes, but for now, what's most important for me to say is that I don't think of them as a checklist. Culturally responsive teaching is anything but a simple formula that can be followed like making a pound cake from scratch. These themes are presented in chapter 3 of my book, CRE in the Classroom. It would be helpful if you've read that chapter and reviewed the themes prior to our first meeting. When we plan, I like to use these 5 guiding questions. These have developed organically over many years of my working and planning spaces with teachers. When I've been part of a successful design, I've gone back and reflected on what was talked about in the planning space. We'll discuss these questions as well, which are presented in chapter 4 of my book, CRE in the Classroom. It would be helpful if you've read that chapter and reviewed those questions prior to our first meeting. The 6 themes and the 5 planning questions taken together are what I call the CRE mental model. A mental model being that which offers tools and perspectives for understanding situations. I understand very well how intense and consuming the teaching profession is, and I am sensitive to the demands placed on your time and attention. I would also add, however, that I only have a short time with you, and I would very much like for it to be as meaningful as possible. All new learning bears with it a challenge, and this is especially true when it involves something as important to us personally as our craft. If our residency goes well, we will have intense and fatigue-inducing days. I will look to find your questions about culturally responsive education and provide an experience that is as responsive as possible to the particular settings in which you're teaching and the content that you deliver to students. The residency is a kind of intense experience. If all goes well, it should be both exhausting and exhilarating as we interrogate our thinking and challenge ourselves to find ways to engage our students in rigorous, engaging, and responsive learning. The good news is I am not an evaluator. I am a thought partner. My task is to create with you a space where we can think in critical and creative terms about how to meet the needs of all of your students, and especially your most vulnerable learners. I invite you to make this personal. Think about the classrooms where you feel unsatisfied with the engagement you've seen from your students. And by all means, bring your inelegant questions, the questions you've wanted to ask but haven't always felt comfortable or confident in doing so. We will plan, teach, and reflect while drawing on the CRE mental model. So while I do expect that this will stretch you in your thinking in positive ways, I also know that there will be opportunities for us to identify promising practices that can close opportunity gaps for our students. That being said, I'm stoked about it, and I look forward to learning with you. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.